Chris Draper, thank you for coming on the documentary Can ODR Change the World? The Story and Promise of Online Dispute Resolution. I'm glad to get a chance to hear your thoughts today about the story of AI and its involvement in ODR. So let's start from the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you have been doing in this work of ODR and AI?
Yeah, so I'm originally a technologist that works on primarily ultra-hazardous systems. And so my career has been how do we help humans make fewer mistakes when they're dealing with an ultra-hazardous technology? And while my career started in the space launch space, which would be rockets and nuclear plants and petrochemical plants, we really consider ultra-hazardous to be anything where small changes in hazard have exponential consequential effects. And in many ways, especially in areas like ODR, that is AI. When you're looking at the ODR space, where I originally engaged, thanks a lot part to Dan Rainey, is we had built a platform called Troct, which assisted labor relations negotiations to arrive at better outcomes more efficiently and in what we would believe is a more informed manner. While we didn't catch on as well with contract disputes, it turns out the way we built the system was a very efficient method for mediation, arbitration, multi-party negotiation. We were really able to help be one of sort of the first facilitation-based ODR platforms that allowed anyone to safely, carefully, with full knowledge of the issues, arrive at a lot of these interest-based resolutions that didn't require a whole bunch of Word documents flying back and forth and 50,000 shades of fuchsia, which is where the details are lost. A lot of the intention, a lot of the points that we're wanting to make in those environments when we're dealing with them as set drafts and set revisions that go back and forth in negotiations lose a lot of the opportunity for true issue identification, for meaningful resolutions that could be long lasting. Our platform was in some ways a little ahead of the time because we still see the same issues existing. And in some ways foreshadowed a lot of both the opportunity and the challenge of what we're seeing with a continual bargaining environment that is possible in many ways with AI offering that fourth party engagement that we've never truly had the ability to reach in the same way we do today.
So what do you do now at Morgan?
So with Morgan AI, we have built a tool that focuses on defining the identity of an organization and identifying how that identity has either been influenced by or can be influenced by these AI tools. So if you think about a business or an organization or any other club or group, our role in business especially is to earn the trust of other parties to the point where they're willing to give us money. In organizations, it is to how do we earn the trust of someone else for them to volunteer for us? How do we earn the trust of those around us to the point of allowing us to be a standards writing organization? All of our organizations earn trust in a whole range of ways that are all 100% dependent on how the individuals that make up the organization ingest information, process it, disseminate it, use it, and engage with our stakeholders. What Morgan does is look at those information flows within those organizations to identify where and which types of individuals are most influential in that process of earning the trust that allows stakeholders to engage in the outcomes that the organization is intending to facilitate.
So you are a mediator yourself, and so you've worked with disputing parties on both sides, and it sounds like you've mainly worked with organizations, but of course, mediation can touch and impact individual people as well. When it comes to AI's involvement in this new ODR space, can you give us the broad view on things? What does AI actually change about how disputes get resolved?
I think the most important part to remember about AI, as we state in governing artificial intelligence, is it's just a mimic. There's really no ghost in the machine. There's no further magic to it. And as it gets better at mimicry and as it gets better at predicting where we think we might want to go, or as it gets better at interpreting how it can best copy what our next thoughts are, it's vital to remember that AI is a different tool than the other technologies we've ever used before. The issues in, for example, uh, data security that we saw with respect to video conferencing when COVID came in, the issues of is the data exactly the same now as it was when I started? These types of issues aren't the core issues of AI. The core issues of AI are informational in nature. AI, because of its very nature, will observe the world through its biases and its filters and its gaps. And it will create its own data set, its own model of what it believes that information told it, from which it will only be engaging with you with synthetic recreations of that information that will hopefully be right enough for what you're needing. The danger of that is that we don't, in the mediation space, recognize or provide the right amount of deference to the reality that it's always going to be a reflection and a mimic of what's truly there. And we're always going to have to be thinking through, is this truly an objective reality I'm dealing with? Is this truly a reflection of the information that is relevant to this issue? And is it interpreting those appropriately for the jurisdiction that I'm working in? The issues of jurisdictional challenges, of interpretation based off of how the AI is trained is no different than when we would deal with these issues with a human. We all have our own biases. We all have tendencies to think of things in certain ways based off our experiences, based off the data sets that we've created in our own brain, from which we now create our new reality going forward. The real difference with AI is the speed at which it can, as we call the spew speed, the speed at which it can produce those things that are so human-like, yet are still synthetic realities that we need to check, that we may not be comfortable enough or may not be capable enough of verifying at the pace at which the tool is able to run.
When we discuss synthetic realities, can you just highlight some of the ethical concerns? You brought up a couple of them and what people's concerns are, but can you just tell us maybe what we have not thought about? We don't know what we don't know. So just highlight for us some things that we need to keep thinking about when it comes to the ethics of all of this.
Well, I think that the first challenge is going to be what is ethics in a way that we can wrap our hands around it, right? I think when you're looking at the ODR standards, you're looking at the iCoder standards, you're looking at how we view a lot of these ways that we should be using technology, the focus on transparency, on accountability, on ensuring that these issues that we deal with in the dispute resolution world are human-human issues. They're solved by humans. They're caused by humans. The more interactions we're allowed to have with each other, the more we're going to need to figure out how to work better together as humans in a very highly human way. These tools amplify and accelerate, for good and for bad, those elements of us that are most human. This is a technology that blends and bends to what we are wanting it to do better and faster than ever before. But as it starts to get better, we, who are supposed to be the safety function in its use, many times it gets worse. the biggest ethical concern is the same as when a partner in a law firm has a really great associate. It's how do you keep nudging yourself awake as that associate gets better and better so that when you find that 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 error, that you're able to catch it 100% of the time? How are you able to ensure that when the tool says, this is how it was summarized, and this is what the intent was, and this is what this other party was looking for, that we double check it? The word that I hate more than anything within the AI discussion right now is hallucination, because it is a marketing term intended to obscure the fact that hallucinations aren't the tool working correctly. It's a situation where the tool correctly working arrived at a position that is in conflict with objective reality. It came out with something not wrong. It came out with something that's within the bounds of what that tool is allowed to do, and it's just not real. It's just not right. It just isn't what was appropriate for that situation. And those, I think, are the greatest ethical issues, which are, as we define ethics in governing artificial intelligence, as I look at the topic over my whole career, I think that when we tie together those pieces, what is responsibility, what is ethics, what is safety, what is all these items, we need to have concise understanding of what are the questions that we can even answer in order to make sure we know what we can ask. And we need to have a solid framing of how we look at them. From my perspective, I would say it's all of our responsibilities when we work with ultra hazardous systems, which is what AI is, that we're behaving ethically. And when we say ethically, I think we need to be looking back at those rules like ABA's 1.6 on confidentiality and identify that ethics is really, when you boil it down, is if you can make something safer, if it's economically viable, if it's technologically viable, if something could be safer for the stakeholders, it's your ethical obligation to make it safer. And safety, in all senses of our systems, whether it be dispute systems, online dispute resolution systems, whether it be AI enabled or not, safety is that iterative practice of reducing the probability or consequence of a negative outcome. And so it is our responsibility at all times to be constantly thinking about, are these tools we're using, are the processes we're using, are the way in which we're using them responsible uses of these tools, knowing that AI is going to accelerate and amplify our ability to do both good and damage faster than we can many times recognize its involvement.
Yes, before we go into the future now, I notice over your shoulder you have your book, Governing Artificial Intelligence.
All about placement.
Can you go ahead and actually just share briefly some of the thesis of the book and why you felt that it was necessary to write it?
Yeah, I mean, the book, which is led by Leah Wing and then myself, Scott Cooper, and Daniel Rainey, was a book that focuses on how we should be thinking about governing these tools and runs through our two sort of main approaches that we always think of, which is standard development, regulation, and walks through, number one, what is AI? Number two, how should we be thinking about safety, ethics, responsibility in the framing and that can be useful for that tool, and then starts to look through both how have we seen regulation within these other technology environments work before? How have we seen the standards that have been main bedrocks of these regulations develop, form, be considered? And lastly, what is the state of play with respect to the standards that are currently now in place, thanks to great work by ICODE or NCTDR with ISO and in partnership with ISO? How do we see the current regulatory, the current standards landscape with respect to ODR translating into a future that's going to need to wrap its head around thoughtful, international, coordinated regulation, management, and partnership around artificial intelligence.
Okay. The subtitle of the documentary is The Story and Promise of Online Dispute Resolution. So, on a timeline, we've looked at ODR from its origins, but also what the future holds. So, with regards to the past and into the present, what can AI do today in dispute resolution that was science fiction just 3 years ago?
I think what we're seeing most evident within the dispute resolution space, which is we have a dispute is identified, we have evidence is brought forward, we have the parties are able to engage each other and talk through their disputes in whatever structure it is before resolution is rendered. I think what we're seeing right now is a capability to gather information, to assemble it quicker than we had before, the ability to create documentation that is able to incorporate so many other ideas, thoughts, components that would have taken ages to ever do. I think AI right now is allowing mediators to explore questions they never would have before. When used well, it's something that is allowing the parties to brainstorm at a higher pace than they ever have before. It's allowing them to respond quicker than it ever has before. So there is a lot in what the parties never could get out of their mediator just because there wasn't enough time or brain power or ability to uh, generate the types of materials that we're seeing able to come out now in minutes, which would have taken hours before. That is uh, an opportunity for everyone when used in the right context to be very, very helpful. What we're also seeing at the same time right now is we're seeing a massive reliance on these tools, often inappropriately, as they get better. We were seeing even just the instances of citations that are incorrect and lawyers are submitting briefs that aren't right. We're seeing instances of even, I believe, a judge in Mississippi had even written a ruling that apparently had been very clearly ChatGPT answer with all of the errors in it that one would fear could come from that. And these types of materials are being built quickly enough. And if we're not careful enough right now, we are laying the bedrock for a new reality and just a new volume of material that may not be able to be relied upon as well as we used to before. We've always had errors. We've always had human error in drafting. You look at textbooks and there's errors in textbooks regularly, despite how much editing that had occurred before. The challenge is when we start to bring in those tools at a speed that we're not always able to catch, and we are starting to become comfortable enough with it that it becomes the official record now of what is considered truth. For example, we're seeing a lot of great opportunity to use these tools for transcription, transcription of the mediation, transcription of public meetings, or of any kind of meetings. And we're able to not only get transcription, we're able to get the meeting notes, the summaries, the next steps, all of that stuff is able to come out of these tools at a pace that is impressive with an accuracy that is significant. The challenge is it's also putting us a little bit to sleep. When we think about public meetings, and every single time we vote on, do I accept the meetings at the last minute? And I would argue probably the vast majority of individuals don't read those minutes, and there's probably some errors in them, but now we're on the record, and that becomes the history. If we now are able to start generating that type of a record that has an error rate that isn't insignificant. We have error rates in many of these tools that are 1 in 5, that are sitting on the order of nearly 15 to 20% in some cases, where we now have created or in many ways allowed the machine to dictate the reality of what happens, if we do enough of that, that's where we really are, the precipice of this challenge with AI is, are we going to be dedicated to the act of, number one, holding the tool to a standard that is appropriate for the human processes that it's really addressing, not having this artificial belief in perfection of the tool. And with that, ensuring that that acknowledgement that this is just another tech. It's not perfect. It's not a panacea. It is not everything. It's an accelerant and amplifier of our human processes. Are we going to constantly be thinking, how do we increase safety by reinventing those ways that we think about working with it in the safest manner? Which brings us in many ways to, depending on how we answer that question, depending on how we resolve in many ways the dispute we have right now within our society of how should we be confronting, working with, and integrating AI into our workplaces, into our daily lives, into our society, I think really gets to the future of ODR, which may be an absence of ODR in the way that we've ever thought about it. We may start to see, because we can identify those potentials for dispute earlier, we may start to have a constantly revolving dispute avoidance infrastructure, more than we have one where things were allowed to get to a point of unreconcilability, to the point where we need many of these one-off instances. I look at it very much like the potential within the labor relations space. Now, the labor relations space traditionally was always, I have a contract and then I have a bargaining period, and from that bargaining period I come up with a new contract, and now I have another contract which sets the standard of my life for the next multiple years, whatever it is. Well, areas that started to work together more closely and started to get ahead of problems before they became real issues were constantly integrating MOUs into them. So they would constantly integrate wards from a mediation or arbitration into that general practice again. And so what you started to see was, by the time we got to negotiating, by the time we got to bargaining, we didn't have a large shelf between how we were expecting to operate, how we were resolving these issues, how were we going to move forward. We were continually engaging with all the stakeholders to ensure that we were operating as effectively as the units as we could. I think in many ways, the future of dispute resolution is going to be one of those priorities, those standards, those expectations of safety in the identification and engagement and resolution of those issues before their disputes will start permeating down further into the chain of engagement. When you're looking at the insurance industry, the end point of the insurance industry too often is the starting point for judicial actions, for civil disputes, and those sort of other areas of conflict that we're looking to avoid. What happens as that front edge of where dispute resolution, where the justice system, what happens when those functions, those pillars of society start to dissipate into our daily lives more effectively, because we have the ability to engage with the expertise more generally, more broadly, more consistently. What happens when these skill sets start to diffuse within our society, driven and led, in many cases pulled along by the capabilities of these AI tools? We have a tremendous opportunity to see far less fractured and significant conflict, but we have far more opportunity at the same time to see the type of systemic movement towards injustice as easily as justice that comes when you have these tiny little imperceivable shifts that occur faster than we can adjust to them, accept them, or see them trending for us.
So, from what I hear you say, there seems to be a big focus on dispute prevention in the future. This is a growing role that ODR is going to play. where instead of reacting to conflicts, which ADR has been doing for many years, ODR, especially with the help of AI, now also has the ability to help avoid conflicts. And I'll bring up an example. Some time ago, I received an email from Stripe, the credit card
Mm.
processing company. And the email says, "Hello, we're excited to share that you'll get access to Smart Dispute starting June 2026. This product will be automatically enabled on your account. Smart Disputes will help you save time managing eligible disputes on card transactions and recover revenue. No action needed from you. Benefits to you, managing disputes is time consuming and it can be difficult to know what evidence to submit. Smart Dispute helps save time, recover revenue, and you can get started with no integrations." And there's more, of course, in the body of the email. So I've noticed this has been a growing trend where individual companies, primarily e-commerce, banking companies, you bought up insurance industry, for example.
Mhm.
All these different industries have their own ways of potentially employing ODR and AI. Can you just speak over the next 5 years? What do you foresee as being a growing trend or trends in the field of ODR because of AI? This example of Stripe is just one example I can think of that I imagine will start picking up steam more and more. But can you share any more thoughts about the future?
Well, I mean, I think that this issue of Stripe is really just an extension of what launched ODR, right? I mean, ODR launched as sort of a identification of digital processes that were being started at eBay. The issue of I have all these transactions, and when I have so many more transactions, I'm going to end up with things that just go wrong. I need a more efficient way to resolve them. And so the e-commerce space was heavily influential on the even start of ODR. And Ethan Caish's great work early on, and Colin Rule's great work, which also Dan and Leah had massive hands in the process of understanding and analyzing just even how do we resolve disputes. How do, when we arrive at this point of conflict, are we able to start to operationalize how the best disputes are resolved? I look at the work of, I'm a big Ava Romowitz fan. And so a lot of my work, especially from about 10 years ago, wrote an article on the pull of unbiased mediation, where you're saying, how should we be implementing these technologies in our disputes, really comes down in many ways to what is that process of resolving disputes in ways that is the same in every environment. And I think it really comes down to two different philosophies to it. Either disputes have known acceptable outcomes and a finite number of known acceptable outcomes, in which case the best method of resolving that dispute is figuring out which bucket do you fit in faster and identifying how do I get to that result, with the assumption that parties that end up in that bucket are going to be happy they're in that right bucket. That filtration-based process of dispute resolution is a lot of ways has been the origin story of ODR, and in many ways has remained an acceptable element for many types of disputes in many cases. The other side of that in the dispute resolution space, which is where we focus with Troct, is on the facilitation-based side. If you want to have a dispute over parking spaces and the end result is one side's happy getting paid in 500 rolls of toilet paper, who cares? As long as it's legal, and that's what all parties fully understanding the issues and fully able to to negotiate equitably in confidence, and they arrive at that decision all clearly and legally, we should allow that. How we apply AI in those two models is going to be drastically different. And which of those models is most appropriate for which types of disputes within our justice system, and making sure we're picking the right structure of resolution is the most important piece for ensuring ODR's meaningful and appropriate involvement in the pursuit of meaningful and true justice moving forward, which I think is what we all got into this for anyway. I don't think anyone got into this to say, man, I really, really wish we could make a nickel off of resolving parking tickets quicker. I think what we're looking for was the justice system has been failing far too many people for far too long. We have systemic challenges within our culture and our society that the court system was just inequipped or ill-equipped to deal with. And dispute resolution provides many pathways for individuals to arrive at the most appropriate resolution for those disputes, and making sure as we start to accelerate and amplify those human aspects of those processes within that dispute resolution environment, as we start to look at where online dispute resolution has started, where it has really truly been recognized to exist, and where it will go, is comes down to many ways how we see the technology relative to how we see the humans in that whole process of engagement and pursuit of a just outcome. When we're looking at ODR, in many ways, our biggest challenge will be, how do we start to see it in all the places it is? If I'm sending a simple torts matter back and forth via email in Word documents, and one side says, they may have started from a form, they filled out the form, said, is the resolution. The other side says, well, it's not, I need X, Y, and Z in this, and they keep shipping that back and forth. Lawyers don't often think about that as being ODR, but technically it is. As we start to think about that process that you're looking at with Stripe, that is within the scope of ODR, is what that is. When we're looking at these automated processes, whether it started at eBay or now it's something that is beginning in little nudges before we even know it's existing in many of the platforms we're dealing with, those are all ODR when you're looking at the definition of ODR as we've used since the mid-90s. Yet we're going to have to, as a community, wrap our heads around, is this something where we are in ODR creating a fundamental shift in the way we think about balance of power, equity, dispute identification, resolution, and avoidance? Or are we going to allow us to miss the opportunity ODR has for our society at large by thinking it is going to have to remain in a pre-packaged item that we can pull off the shelf as an element within a larger ecosystem? I think that ODR personally, especially when you are ethically using artificial intelligence for the elements of facilitation that dispute resolution can provide, is going to be transformative and engaged in every element of our society. And we need to be ready for how we look at the landscape as systems, components, and add-ins versus one that has traditionally been one of single locations, co-location within unitary platforms. I think that is where the true promise of ODR sits for all of us in our society, if we're prepared to engage it in all those different facets of where it's going to need to be.
Thank you. I think you just answered the question, can ODR change the world, with, that last, part. So I'll leave you with this one last question, and that's about, I guess what I'll call the human in the middle. We oftentimes talk, maybe with some consternation, a little bit of fear about what this means for us, for people, for humans, for workers. This has been transformative, to say the least, AI's involvement in all the different industries in the world. For the mediation field, the arbitration field, the conflict resolution field writ large, what are some thoughts you might share with people who might be watching this, who are in conflict resolution, who might just be a little concerned about AI basically trying to replace conflict resolvers. And just broadly speaking, you can kind of answer it, as you see fit. Go ahead.
I think there should be significant concern with the idea of AI replacing conflict resolvers in the exact same way there should be concern with the idea of AI replacing employees in a workplace, or any time that we believe that the machine, by the nature of being machine, will be more just, more contextually relevant, more equitable than the humans involved in the process. I think that the challenge we're going to have is, because AI looks like magic, we want to see a ghost in the machine where there isn't one. We want to see intelligence that doesn't exist. We want to see the magic in the mimicry. That's just the way we typically want it, because the reality is human conflicts will always be solved by humans, because that's what it is. It's how are humans going to interact with each other? It's how are humans going to learn to adapt to each other better? It's that connection, it's that responsibility, it's that engagement that we all must share that is the heart of dispute identification, avoidance, resolution, of just life. When you all of a sudden start to see the internet be 60% of just machines talking to machines, it makes you wonder what the point is, because the initial objective was allow humans to connect with humans better. When we start to see, in some ways with irony, when we went into the pandemic and all these professors were creating videos of all of their classes, and now we're using AI to create bullet points of the videos for them to actually read the bullet points, we're seeing these massive shifts that technology is providing us. But not getting back to the reality is our role in ODR as dispute resolvers is those who are in general there to allow society to reach just outcomes more efficiently, effectively, and meaningfully, is always going to be a human job. Now, we will always, as we have since the dawn of time, since the pencil was invented, which was a technological revolution of the time, the invention of the pencil did not erase the need for the human. AI is not going to erase the need for the human. In many ways, it is going to accelerate the need for that human to not just be there, but to be rethinking how they are keeping the needs of the parties, the equity that that process must have in order for it to be ethical, front and center. It is the fact that this tool can do so much so quickly and look so right in an environment of massive speeds that are all based on this synthetic reality. The human is more vital than ever, but must be inserted at the right spice. They must be in the same way that we think about AI being inserted in the dispute. If AI's role is to find disputes that look most similar to bucket them, that may work for certain types of disputes. But if we're looking at the discovery of issues we've never even defined yet, if we're looking at hidden interests and those types of items, we need to make sure that the model is, number one, applied right. We need to make sure that our algorithm, how we resolve disputes, is clear. We need to make sure that if what we're saying is that I'm able to resolve disputes by identifying where we can agree, by building upon those agreements and ensuring inclusion, if we're saying that's the process, we need to make sure that that model is built in the right place for the right thing, is engaging the humans at the right step to ensure that it is doing what we want it to be, which is augmenting our ability as dispute resolvers to allow individuals every right they are owed to engage with the rest of society in a way that is most meaningful, appropriate, and purposeful to them. That's our role at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Chris Draper, for coming on the documentary Can ODR Change the World?